That's right. I'm back to making videos. My mental health is slightly better. I've started taking antidepressants, although I'm not sure if they actually work because my reaction to them has been weird and there's a slight chance that I have more than just plain old depression, which I'm still trying to grapple with the fact. That's not my point. For whatever reason, my video about Love Never Dies that I made during the initial lockdown in 2020 is continuing to gain traction over 3 years later, which I was fine with until I received this comment recently from that beardy musicology guy. From comments here, it's extremely obvious no one read the actual book by Gaston Leroux. This brings much more elements from the original book. Raoul is a spoiled and petulant nobleman who has that idea he's entitled to Christine because they grew up together. Blah 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 blah. I think the idea that this is a spiritual successor is really important because it allows us to have some form of fan service for Phantom and Christine for that shipping. However, I think the musical motifs are extremely important because it has continuity, and that's what we have in a sequel. If you study music, I have a lot of degrees and experience. Music must have consistency for a series. We also have associations with types of melody and writing for scenes and characters. Blah, blah, blah. Honestly, if you study music, you see much more the genius and why it works. And I was furious. This criticism is fair. After all, I made this silly little video in one day on a whim. I didn't think about it too hard. But things have changed in the past 3 years. I'm much older now. I've listened to every Broadway musical between the years 1950 and 2020. I too have a degree and experience, albeit in theater and dramaturgy. And that beardy musicology guy is right. I haven't read the actual book by Gaston Leroux. So you know what I did? I read the actual book by Gaston Leroux. And just for fun, I read the sequel by Frederick Forsyth, The Phantom of Manhattan. I listened to the cast recording of Love Never Dies. I watched the Melbourne Pro Shot. I got my hands on every single bootleg live tutorial that I could find on YouTube. I have traveled down every single possible rabbit hole that I could find on this godforsaken show. And I am here to tell you that Love Never Dies is still fundamentally bad in much more than 3 minutes. But first, what is Love Never Dies? I'm going to add the disclaimer now that I've been working on this video for an embarrassingly long time, so outfit continuity is going out the window. In order to explain what this forsaken musical is, we need to go into the history of the entire Phantom franchise. Gaston Leroux was an aspiring lawyer turned journalist turned novelist who wrote The Phantom of the Opera, inspired by the combination of a tragic incident involving a falling chandelier and rumors of a ghost in a Paris opera house. In his lifetime, he was more well known for his mystery novels such as The Mystery of the Yellow Room. However, this changed in 1922 when he gave a copy of his book to Carl Laemmle, the head of Universal Pictures. This led to a silent film adaptation of Phantom of the Opera in 1925, which helped Leroux gain international fame. In 1943, there was a Technicolor adaptation with a lot more behind-the-scenes drama that is not relevant to the topic at hand, so I will not travel down this rabbit hole. But needless to say, these were the 2 films that then inspired Sir Andy. Jump forward about 60 years to 1984, when Andrew Lloyd Webber, hot off the presses with his musical Starlight Express, and I suppose Cats as well, went to his good pal Cameron Mackintosh to make a new musical. They thought of adapting the movie version but couldn't figure out how to do so until Lloyd Webber found a copy of Leroux's book. There was actually a big hubbub as to whether the musical is based on or inspired by the novel because initially there wasn't any mention of Leroux in the production billing and the producers and Leroux estate did not agree on which one gave the proper credit. But anyway, the novel combined with seeing a camp adaptation of Phantom inspired Lloyd Webber to create a romantic musical. His words, not mine. The Phantom of the Opera opened on the West End in 1986 and opened on Broadway in 1988 as what would end up being the longest running Broadway show ever with 13,981 performances. Quick addendum, Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote the role of Christine for his wife at the time, Sarah Brightman. They met during Lloyd Webber's production of Cats in 1981 and married 3 years later. This stirred up a lot of controversy because they both divorced their former partners the previous year. Regardless, Andy composed all the songs to showcase his wife's voice and her impressive vocal range. And then there's the sequel. Lloyd Webber started thinking about a follow-up story with Phantom production designer Maria Bjornson in 1990, around the same time that he got divorced from Sarah Brightman. So began the process of consulting various writers, including Frederick Forsyth in 1997. After this initial discussion, however, it became clear that their concepts of the story were heading in different directions. So Forsyth continued to work on and publish what would later become The Phantom of Manhattan in 1999, and Lloyd Webber would continue to think about this story on and off for the next several years. Finally, he met with Ben Elton, who ended up being the perfect writer for Lloyd Webber's concept. Elton offered the idea of following the original characters from Phantom instead of introducing several new ones, and the seeds for Love Never Dies were planted. But then Andrew Lloyd Webber's cat accidentally deleted the entire score. And here's where things get mind-boggling for me. According to the June 2007 Playbill article that describes the kitten incident, Lloyd Webber said, "I've got to write another show soon or I'll go mad. The most important thing is the plot, so I've been writing it with Freddie." I'm so sorry, my British accent is terrible. But in the archived composer note from Love Never Dies' website, he said, "In 2006, I decided to look at it again and discussed it with several writers and directors. But again, it was to no avail until I outlined the problems I had with the plot to my old friend and colleague Ben Elton. Come the autumn of 2007, Ben had shaped a story that I felt could make work." And in this 2012 interview, lyricist Glenn Slater said, "The other part of my job was to help shape the story and give it some more dramatic impact. The synopsis that Ben Elton had done was very detailed, but it felt very static." So what is the truth? This part of the history should have been straightforward, but it isn't, and I don't know why. Anyway, it debuted on the West End in 2010, starring fan favorites Ramin Karimloo and Sierra Bogus. One more addendum. Andrew Lloyd Webber composed a song in the 90s titled "The Heart is Slow to Learn" that was originally performed by Kirite Kanagawa at a 1998 concert celebrating Lloyd Webber's 50th birthday. The chorus was then used in his 2000 musical The Beautiful Game, now titled Our Kind of Love. This then became the titular song of the sequel musical we all know and love, Love Never Dies. And this is where I do a cool transition. Woohoo! For those of you who are not intimately familiar, here is a quick recap of the plot. Love Never Dies is set 10 years after the events of Phantom of the Opera. Christine is a successful opera singer and married to Raoul with a 10-year-old boy named Gustave. The Phantom runs a Coney Island amusement park, and Madame Giry produces vaudeville shows at the park with her daughter Meg Giry. Christine and her little family arrive in New York after being offered to make her American debut, but uh-oh, spaghetti-o! The Phantom comes and offers Christine the chance to sing for him for a lot more money. Also, they say that Raoul has become a heavy drinker and gambler and is always angry and sad. Anyway, it's revealed that Christine and Phantom met before her wedding night, and they did the deed. And wouldn't you know it, Gustave isn't Raoul's kid, but is actually the Phantom's. Of course, he doesn't realize this until later when he sees Gustave's musical talent and remarks, "He's just 10 years old."
10 years old.
The Giry's and the Shawnees reunite and lots of drama happens. The Phantom and Raoul make a bet to see if Christine will perform and ultimately which man she's gonna choose. In the end, Christine sings, effectively breaking up with Raoul. Meg has a breakdown and kidnaps Gustave, almost kills him, tries to kill herself, but ends up accidentally killing Christine. Christine dies in the Phantom's arms, and Gustave accepts the Phantom as his one true father. There's a few differences between the West End, Melbourne, and US tour productions, but at its core, this is the story. So, is this a sequel? According to Andrew Lloyd Webber, it's not. I don't regard this as a sequel. It's a standalone piece. That being said, oh, what's that? He also said, clearly it is a sequel, but I really do not believe that you have to have seen The Phantom of the Opera to understand Love Never Dies. I really don't. But I hope if you see them together, if you wanted to see them back to back, that what you would get from them, from both of them, is the extension of where the story goes. Okay, so it is a sequel. The composer didn't view it as a sequel as much as a second story with these characters. Okay, so it's a second story. Like a sequel. Regardless, let's look at the show as a standalone adaptation first, and then compare it again with the context of Phantom. I wrote that statement before I actually read Love Never Dies, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I think Love Never Dies is marginally better. First of all, Frederick Forsyth begins his book with some spicy hot takes. He says that LaRue wrote the wrong version of events. He wrote the story! What do you mean? Forsyth further asserts that Andrew Lloyd Webber's version of events is correct. For example, he says, LaRue appears to have made an error with the position, appearance, and intelligence of Madame Giry, an error corrected in the Lloyd Webber musical. One must forgive LaRue for this, for he was relying on human memory, that of his informants, and they were clearly describing another woman. What? If you're writing a sequel, second story, you can't negate the information of the original story. I don't care if this is a hypothetical preface written by a fictional author. You can't do that. If you wanted to write a sequel to Andrew Lloyd Webber's version, you could have just done so. You did not have to undermine the original novel. And this isn't relevant to Love Never Dies as a musical, but I just wanted to take a moment to touch on some of the bonkers plot points that only happen in the novel. Madame Giry dies in the first chapter. The Phantom now praises Mammon, the god of wealth. His servant, Darius, is the one who converts him to this religion, and Darius is 100% evil, no denying that. Raoul cannot have children because of an incident where his body part down there got shot off while he was trying to stop a mugging. Christine is apparently pregnant at the time of her opera house rescue, and Raoul just marries her out of the kindness of his heart. Let's go with that. A news reporter has to locate the Phantom and deliver a letter from the now deceased Madame Giry to the Phantom, and a wild goose chase ensues. Christine still dies, but this is because she hugs Pierre, and spins him around just the right amount to get shot by Darius, who is aiming for the child. And as a cherry on top, this finale is all told from the perspective of an entirely different news reporter. It is extremely difficult to look at Phantom of Manhattan and believe that Love Never Dies is based off of this book. Sure, it's set in New York and Christine still comes to sing and eventually dies at the end, but there's so much that is fundamentally different. Meg Giry gets one little chapter where she describes a scene as Christine's maid, and then she disappears, never to be seen from again. In fact, that happens with a lot of characters here. We hear more from various journalists and reporters than the actual Phantom himself. I've read a couple of bad books in my day, but this one definitely takes the cake. So let's move on before I continue to lose my mind. It has been so long since I recorded something for this video. Do you want to know how long it's been? In the time between the last session and this current one, I have adopted a dog, gotten autism. Well, I've always had autism. It's not that I got it. It's just I got a diagnosis for it. I went to Vietnam and Japan with my father for basically a whole month, and it came back. This one was recent. And I got little streaks in my hair. How cute. Anyways, let's take a look at Love Never Dies as a sequel to Phantom of the Opera. Love Never Dies is set in 1907, 10 years after the events of Phantom, so that means Phantom takes place in 1897. Oh, what's that? Phantom of the Opera is set in 1881, you say? There's a 16-year discrepancy? Oh, what else is that, you say? The original Phantom playbill states that the show is set in 1881, while later editions simply round it to the late 1800s in order to accommodate the inconsistency Love Never Dies created. Oh, there's more. The Melbourne Pro Shot includes text which states that everything happened in 1895? Huh, would you look at that? Major time discrepancy aside, I am going to refer to Schaeffer's Productions' definition of a perfect sequel. It has to expand the universe in a meaningful way, continue the story in a new, compelling way, introduce new, compelling themes, or expand on the original, and leave an undeniable impact on the franchise. Number 1. Expand the universe. Besides moving to a thrilling new city, I think we lose a lot of the universe. What happens to Monsieur Firmin and Monsieur Andre? Carlotta, the entire Paris Opera House. Gustave is a new addition, but what does he do besides confirm that the Phantom and Christine had a pre-wedding affair? And speaking of this affair, it does not diegetically make sense. Christine just ran away with Raoul. The Phantom let them go. He disappears into the night. Meg finds only his mask, lights down, blah, blah, blah. You're telling me that Christine immediately located him and then proceeded to do the deed with him multiple times in one night? The Phantom, who very notably never experienced any real intimacy until Christine kissed him in the original story? And then Madame Giry had the resources to smuggle him across international waters to New York? But this is also leading into the second point. Number 2. Continue the story. The story does continue, but not without changing a lot about the characters at their core. Let's cover the main 5 one by one. In the original Phantom novel, Christine is very naive and willing to believe a lot of what people say they are. When a voice tells her that he is an angel of music, she believes it without a doubt. However, she knows she is in a bad situation. She is aware that she must leave Eric, but she feels obligated to return to him out of fear of him harming himself or others. She makes deals with Eric and finds ways to work around them so that she can still find a way to see Raoul. I also think musical Christine has a lot more agency. Sure, things have spiraled wildly out of control by the time the finale rolls around, but she makes a lot of the important decisions. She chose to sing in the final opera. She chooses to continue even when she knows it's the Phantom singing with her. She chooses to remove his mask on stage. And when she was given the choice of the Phantom or Raoul, she found a third route. Compassion. Her love for the Phantom isn't necessarily romantic or sexual or even musical. It's empathy for someone who has suffered so much for his appearance. That's what saves everyone's life at the end. Even in the book, the Persian says that it's Christine's, quote, sublime selflessness that saved their lives. Sequel Christine. She loses a lot of the agency that she had before. Her fate is now up to two men who are fighting over her, who are deciding for her what her life will be if she sings the song. Sure, the implication of her singing is that she chose the Phantom, but what happened to the Christine who chose things for herself, who found another way to make things work out? Her death isn't even because of her choices. The Phantom said the wrong thing and Meg accidentally fires the gun in the struggle. She was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and that led to her demise. There's no good justification for that.
Raoul, it's useless!
I wouldn't say that he is a spoiled and petulant nobleman who has the idea he's entitled to Christine because they grew up together. Sure, that's one interpretation of what the text offers, but Book Raoul is a bit of a softie too. He's described as remarkably shy, and one might be tempted to say pure. It was as if he had only just left the care of his loving sisters and aunt. This exclusively female upbringing had given him candid manners stamped with a charm hitherto unblemished. I think his obsession over Christine comes from being concerned that his childhood friend is not behaving like herself. After all, they grew up together. They spent so much time with each other, and now she's avoiding him left and right with very little explanation. And when he does learn about everything Christine's experienced, okay, I'll give you this. He doesn't have the best reaction. It's a little victim blaming and accusatory. But honestly, if you were given 20 pages of exposition in a single night on a rooftop, I'd like to see you try to handle that well. But in the end, he doesn't really do much. It's mostly the Persian and Christine who carry most of the action. Now that I think about it, Raoul is a pretty minor character when it comes to carrying action. Musical Raoul has a lot of interpretations, and I've seen a lot of them. At the core though, Raoul has some sort of feelings for Christine, whether they are genuine or temporary, and he will do anything to help her during this very complicated and difficult time in her life. Okay, he does try to convince Christine to do something she doesn't want to do for the sake of stopping the Phantom, and he's pretty useless in the finale again, literally roped up in other pressing issues. He's just a pretty boy, and you know what? That is okay. I used to think that sequel Raoul didn't match the present Raoul's at all, but now I see a potential through line. 10 years later, Raoul is an alcoholic, a gambling addict, not to mention short-tempered, which could happen if he experiences a lot of terrible things that he couldn't cope well with. But wasn't that all Christine? Wasn't she the one who definitely has all that trauma? At the time of Love Never Dies starting, Raoul didn't even know that Gustave actually wasn't his son, nor that the Phantom was luring them there. And a controversial perspective, if one had to travel across the ocean for their famous wife to sing and then have your private financial issues publicized, and then the person who you traveled across the world for didn't show up, maybe one would be a little grumpy. I'm not saying that this Raoul is at all in line with the character that we are familiar with. I will say that Raoul is probably the most compelling character in all this. He knows he has his issues, but he feels powerless to do anything about it. He wants to do better by his family, but he keeps messing up. Is he a good person? No, not at all, but God, he is so interesting. Again, he's pretty useless for the finale, but that's just par for the course.
Give me the gun, Meg.
In both the original novel and the musical, Meg is a relatively minor character. In fact, in the novel, I think she's about as significant as Sorelli, and if you haven't read the novel and you're asking me, who's Sorelli? Exactly. Musical Meg acts more as the representative of the opera house company, presenting the general perspective of the performers who only know about the myth of an opera ghost. The most important thing she does in the plot is discover that the Phantom is gone, leaving only his mask fade to black, etc., etc. Giving Meg more character depth in a sequel is not a bad idea. In fact, I think it's a great opportunity, but it's so misused. Meg makes a lot of decisions that aren't really well explained in the musical. Why does she go to New York with her mother? Why does she want the Phantom's attention? Why does she do all these things for him without really having had a personal connection beforehand? Why does she still yearn for his attention after 10 years of being unnoticed? You think a poor girl would take a hint. Even I, a hopeless romantic, only had a crush for 4 years at most. They say obsession biologically lasts 4 years at most, but science doesn't apply to us. In fact, the only time she talks to the Phantom is at the very end. You know, when the whole kidnapped Gustav thing is happening. And her spiral at the end is just so sudden. I think there were attempts at dropping hints at this, such as her learning that Christine will be singing, and her whole thing about sinking into the sea, and her mom pushed over the edge, that much was clear. I just wish there was more of it added in Act 2. It's also focused on, ooh, which man will Christine choose? That there isn't much room left for Meg. She appears once to warn Raoul about the concert and drops the, once he gets into her soul, there's nothing she won't do for him, foreshadowing. And then it's the concert. In my original video, I held the most contempt for how much Madame Giry changed. And my opinion has not changed, disregarding novel Giry, because she is vastly different from the musical. Phantom Giry is stern and tough, but cares for everyone's well-being, Christine and Raoul's included. Why else would she tell Raoul to keep your hand at the level of your eye if she wasn't rooting for him to make it out alive? As for sequel Giry, I think it is in character for her to help the Phantom escape Paris. I don't think it's in character for her to resent the Chagnys, nor to insist that Christine made the wrong choice. And this idea she had the right to inherit the Phantom's empire, I think it would make sense for a character to feel that way after 10 years of service, but Madame Giry? And yes, she was always strict with Meg, but she also cares for her and her well-being. When Meg offered to go with Raoul to save Christine, Madame Giry tells her to stay put, knowing it's a dangerous situation to be in. So why does she let her daughter go through terrible things so that they could support the Phantom? The way it's directed in both the Australian and West End productions implies she didn't know Meg did this. Ma'am, how did you not notice this at all? You used to watch her like a hawk. What happened? And then, there's the Phantom. I think he's the only one who remains the most consistent with his character. I know, surprising, right? Sad man who's disfigured and writes good music is obsessed with Christine to an alarming level. Yup. 3. Introduce or expand on themes. The primary themes on Phantom reflect on music, beauty, and compassion. I would say Love Never Dies does quite an excellent job of expanding on beauty. It explores how beauty can be found in the darker aspects of life, as opposed to Phantom, which is focused on physical appearances. This beauty is how the Phantom and Gustav can connect with each other. The other two don't get touched on as much, besides music, because, you know, the Phantom is a composer. A new theme presented is choices. We see this in Once Upon Another Time, Devil Take the Hindmost, and Mother Did You See? The central idea is that Christine made the wrong choice, and now she is given the opportunity to make the right one. Additionally, there's the consequences of making those choices. For example, Christine and Phantom did the deed, and now there's a 10-year-old boy in this world. 4. Leave an undeniable impact on the franchise. If you're a mega fan, then one could say that it definitely made an impact. There's even a website called Love Should Die that compiles tons of theater critics and average theater goers' reviews bashing the musical. But in the grand scheme, it really didn't leave an impact. The Phantom of the Opera was a mega sensation that became known internationally. The half mask is so iconic that it is referenced in pop culture all the time. And Love Never Dies? Not so much. I made an informal poll on Instagram asking my followers if they had heard of Love Never Dies, and 61% said no. That doesn't seem too bad, but every single person who said yes was a theater person. This musical is unknown in the Phantom franchise to the general public. Are there people who absolutely love the musical? Yes. And I'm still not sure why. Ooh. And now, the event we've all been waiting for. I read the book by Gaston Leroux. It's fine. I wouldn't call it a masterpiece. The mystery investigation premise is a bit contrived, and the sequencing of events is extremely disorienting. There's the entire 20-page chapter that is dedicated to Christine telling Raoul everything that's happened to her over the past several months that I already alluded to. And then there's this whole thing with a safety pin. But the core story is very compelling. You can tell where the Phantom musical draws their inspiration/base from, the lines to the scenery. There's a bit of wibble wobble with the characters, which makes sense if you're going to condense an entire book into a 2-hour show. For example, Madame Giry is the ballet director instead of the Box 5 attendant, and Meg is Christine's close friend and plays a greater role. I don't know how Love Never Dies could be a sequel to the novel. Besides the fact that the Phantom dies at the end of the story, even if he somehow faked his death, it's such a drastic story shift. None of the major aspects of Love Never Dies could be hinted at in the original story. Not Madame Giry's resentment towards Christine, not Raoul's drinking and gambling problem, certainly not Meg's tragic story, and most definitely not the creation of Gustave. But anyways, all this in-depth comparison to the original musical and Lloyd Webber's insistence that Love Never Dies is more of a second story had me wondering, could someone understand what this musical is about without having seen or remembered the first one? So I did what anyone would do. I recruited my normie boyfriend to watch the Melbourne Pro Shot. Hi, I am here with Greg, my boyfriend. We are still dating.
Yes, those are both factual statements.
No, but I am here to force you to watch Love Never Dies, the sequel to Phantom of the Opera. Now, Greg, how much do you know about Phantom of the Opera?
Not a lot. I saw it once when I was like in elementary or middle school, but I have forgotten a lot since.
What do you remember about it?
There's a phantom. He's at the opera. Half his face is fucked up. He was part of a show that went awry years ago, and he kind of haunts it, to my knowledge. And he also falls in love with the main female cast member there.
Okay.
And they're also people who are running the show now are trying to get rid of him, but he like kills a whole bunch of fucking people.
Okay. So you're kind of sort of familiar with the franchise.
I know that's like the basic point of it, right?
You don't remember the music or anything like that, or like what people say?
I know like the main song where he tells the girl to sing for him.
Oh, the...
Yes, that
Okay.
one. That's about it.
It's a meme. Have you seen the one where it's like the little mouse thing? It's like, sing for me.
No, I have not.
Okay. Well, anyways, we're watching Love Never Dies. Bye! What was that, Greg?
It kind of sounds like they're singing about an abusive relationship.
Interesting. So, Greg, we're currently in the middle of the 8-minute long song about their one-night stand. What did you just say?
I think we're gonna find out that her kid is actually the son of the Phantom and not the like male rights activist guy.
Interesting. Greg, what just happened?
Dude hasn't seen this chick in 10 years after they hooked up one time.
Uh-huh.
And now he's telling her, dude, I made you think I was dead for 10 years. After we hooked up, after I hit it and quit it. But I love you, can't live without you. She's like, oh, that sucked. I don't want to be here with you anymore. She's like, well, too bad. I'm going to threaten your kid's life unless you do what I say. This feels like when a teenage emo head brings a child into his room. It's like, don't you feel the darkness, bro? Yeah, dude, went too far.
So, Greg, we just finished Act 1. Tell me what has happened so far.
So, Christine got invited to perform in New York by this other very famous, like, producer. I guess that was part of his ploy, get her there, and to have her sing for him because he's obsessed. Goes a little too far, showed the kid his messed up face, and the kid freaked out because he's a kid. But I feel like she shouldn't be that mad because if it's like a partnership, she's like still getting her portion. He likes this one hyper-specific thing about her, and because of it, he's trying to control her life into his life in a way that he likes. The kid asked, why does dad not love me? And then she goes into this song about like romantic love. That's not the kind of love the kid was asking about. She kind of lost the plot on this one. It was like, oh son, your father loves you. You know, one day you'll meet a woman and that's how you know what love is.
So, Greg, now that we approach Act 2, what do you think is going to happen?
That one lady with like the bun, kind of like
Madame Giry?
Yes, she's gonna try to kill the kid.
Oh.
Maybe even Christine. May try to loop in Christine's current husband, who also sucks, because they seem to have a good rapport. There may have been some jealousy between Christine and her friend, because she's like, oh man, this was supposed to be like my night. So maybe there might be something that she tries to wedge a thing between. The Phantom is going to die again in this movie, just through some form of sacrifice.
So, just to confirm, you think the Phantom's going to die? Is anyone else going to die, or just the Phantom?
Yeah, I think this lady is also going to die.
Madame Giry?
Yes, her.
Alright.
Maybe also, but I'm leaning toward no. The friend who's a little jealous that Christine's going to take her number too.
Meg Giry?
Yes. Maybe. Because she's coming off very innocent right now. Yes. And I feel like you come off very innocent in these types of shows, you're bound for death.
Okay. Well, Greg, We're gonna find out if you're correct in Act 2. Wahoo!
Give me the gun, Meg.
So, Gregory, we just watched all of Love Never Dies.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think overall?
Fucking Christina's life was just... Oh, that sucked.
What did you think of the story, like, as a whole? Like, its writing, like, its characters and plot?
I feel like the entire first half, I kind of wish we would have got more character development on the side characters. I feel like it was very heavy on the Phantom and Christine.
Mm-hmm.
That I feel like we could have connected more with the other characters, so the stuff they do in the back half of it. Meg is obviously infatuated with the Phantom. We know that early on, but I would have liked to know early on why she's so infatuated with it. You know, is it just continued wit? Music? What is it? He somehow dies in the first one. Don't remember that, honestly. Again, just from time. And relocates to New York. That's interesting. Interesting choice.
Based on what you have learned here, what can you tell me about the original musical, The Phantom of the Opera?
Raoul, the Phantom, and Christine were present.
Uh-huh.
The other two ladies may have been present, but not a very prominent part of the show. Honestly, everything I said in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing has changed. Other than the fact, the only thing that's changed is that apparently he dies in the end of Phantom of the Opera, but it's dies with air quotes now. And they move him to New York to keep him from, I guess, being convicted of the crimes he committed there.
What if I told you that he didn't die in the first show?
He didn't?
No, he just mysteriously disappeared and he left behind only his mask, and then Meg picked it up and went, whoa. It's a very iconic final image.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just disappears into the night.
And he got himself a new mask.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah.
One last question, Greg. While watching this particular production, I counted 11 references, 1 visual, 10 musical references. Were you able to identify what they were?
Musical, in terms of every time, it was just a tune from the original musical that was playing, like the kid playing the Phantom song and also the Phantom song coming in on the kid's toy.
What?
Yeah.
That one?
Yeah. And the very end, the visual of just taking the mask and just doing the like... Yeah, I believe Christine did that in the original. Am I correct in that?
Oh, I guess that's true, huh?
Yeah.
I wrote them down, but I realized I can't look at my phone.
Okay.
Here are the references that I can remember off the top of my head. The visual reference is the monkey with the cymbals at the very beginning while the circus is passing through, you know? There's like the guys with the big masks.
Oh, yeah.
The monkey with the cymbal.
Oh.
There's a few that was like, oh, I am your angel of music.
Oh, no, I'm familiar with that. I thought they were just
Come to me, angel of music. That was in the first show.
Yeah, I thought that was just a continued, like, usage of, like... I didn't know that was, like, being referenced. I thought it was just more of... Like, that's their pet nickname.
Just a fun tune.
Yeah.
A fun tune.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and then the other one, the one's like, Christine, don't think that I don't care, but every hope and every prayer rests on you now.
I don't know if he had any endearing qualities or redeeming qualities in the original. I'm sure he did, which is why it's a classic. That made him less... I don't know if they just made him less likable in this.
Who? Which one?
The Phantom?
The Phantom, yes.
Me, personally, the Phantom was very unlikable.
Gregory, here's my hot take.
Yeah.
There are 2 very strong camps of thought with the Phantom of the Opera. Those who really think that Christine should have been with Raoul, and those who really think that Christine should have been with the Phantom.
Oh no, she needs to be she needs to focus on herself is what I would say.
And there are some people who are Team Christine. But the main reason that people feel pity for the Phantom is because in the first show, it was revealed that like he was like rejected by his own mother because of how he looked, and he was kind of like a reject. He wasn't loved by anybody. Nobody wanted to look at him. Nobody wanted to touch him even, you know. So he was this human being who grew up without any like love or sympathy, you know. And so that part of him, to a lot of people is very empathetic. That is the angle that the Phantom comes through as. He's a musical genius. He's so good at writing music, and he's like a genius, but he's cursed with his appearance. And so he's forced to be a ghost in this opera house in order to survive. Greg, does love never die?
I don't think there was any love in here. I think it was just all toxic ships.
Greg, okay. Here's my next question. Do you think this is a good sequel?
I don't know, just because I don't obviously recall a lot of the first.
Okay. And my second question, just overall, do you think this is a good story?
I'm not the Broadway guy. I don't feel like I'm the person to ask for this.
But like you're a writer. You write stories.
Yeah.
You write shows and stuff. Like you create stories and you know how like most like story beats go.
Christine's whole thing, her whole job is literally two things. One, singing, go where we tell you to sing and sing, and two, tell me which guy you love. That's it. The other two guys, they all kind of just feel very controlling. One kid needs so badly a thesaurus. And to learn how to swim. A lot of that last scene could have just been like avoided if he just knew how to swim. It's like, okay, throw the kid in. He could just swim to shore. The other two, like, minor characters too, just because we were so focused on the Phantom and Christine, I would have liked more backstory on why they chose, those two people decided to follow the Phantom, why they're so dedicated, why they're so worried about what they're losing. Because the dude, he had a kid for 10 years and didn't know. He owes some child support, you know? I feel like their drives right now are very shallow. And a little more understanding of these people would have been nice. That's just me, though.
Yeah. Gregory, on an S through F scale.
No, don't do this to me.
What would you give this show?
I'm not good at Broadways.
Just like in general, like as a whole, like what you just observed before you, like a movie. Think this like a weird movie.
Okay, C+.
C+. You heard it here, folks. Thank you, Gregory. Say goodbye, Gregory.
Goodbye, Gregory.
Let's talk about directorial choices, starting with the West End production. There's a few small music changes from the Melbourne production which most people are familiar with. The Beauty Underneath has an additional verse and melody that sounds like,
Can you taste it? Have you heard its music and embraced it? Do you crave the visions that it shows you? Do you wonder why it chose you like it knows you?
We're going to talk about all this later. But I think the most offensive thing about this production is that the staging is just boring. The Adelphi Theater's stage for Love Never Dies seems so massive, and yet the action and the ensemble feel like they can't fill up that space. Even worse, none of the movement is purposeful. In Dear Old Friends, everyone just kind of wanders back and forth. It's giving Viewpoints 101. In Beauty Underneath, Gustav and the Phantom just walk in circles around his lair while the strange humans walk on and off stage. And this may be a personal taste rather than genuine critique, but I want theater to be active and dynamic. Move throughout the space, utilize it. You're not constricted to being uber realistic unless that's your intention. I think if you're making a Broadway quality show, especially one that is the sequel to the epitome of 1980s mega musical and spectacle, you could do more. And finally, the Melbourne Pro Shot. Personally, I love the production design. The set is larger than life and the costumes are gorgeous. I love Christine's peacock dress in the finale, although why it is a peacock, I do not know. Lots of changes to the sequence of songs occur here, especially with Till I Hear You Sing opening the show rather than following Coney Isle. The US tour mimics the Melbourne production in terms of production design and song sequence, except for a few things. Christine's melody, you know the one. Returns once more through Gustav. They also bring the additional melody from the London production back into Beauty Underneath, but we'll talk about that in the next and final chapter.
There is no now.
Let's talk about the music. Some of it's not bad. In fact, Till I Hear You Sing is one of my favorite musical theater songs. There's a reason I enjoy ALW's music, in spite of some split opinions amidst the theater community. He's very good at nailing the fusion between rock and opera, and his usage of full orchestras that aren't as popular in many modern musicals make a sound that is so unique. That said, some of Love Never Dies is really rough. May I highlight lyrics such as,
You chose to turn the page, and I made choices too. Where was she when the lawman hounded him? Gone, long gone. We stayed on.
When you stare behind the night, can you glimpse its primal might? Might you hunger to possess, hunger that you can't repress?
Yes. But that's not all you did. You left me with a son.
Is he more, you or me? Which one do you find most? You lie!
And who could forget?
Give me the gun, Meg.
Also, I cannot tell if I genuinely enjoy Beauty Underneath or if I've just tricked myself into enjoying it because it's so bad. You know, the same way that I tricked myself into doing this because I used to hate it, but then I started doing it ironically, and that ironic enjoyment became genuine enjoyment. Those of you who watched my Broadway 2-day videos may remember I said this about Phantom. The motifs are sometimes overused, and a lot of the show really just uses the same few melodies over and over again. And this in my original Love Never Dies video. I suppose the music's alright, and the Australian production has beautiful design elements, but does there seriously need to be Phantom motifs in every song? So let's delve into the motifs, and why I dislike Andrew Lloyd Webber's usage of them. I agree with Beardy Musicology Guy that motifs are an extremely effective tool in storytelling. It's how we can communicate about characters, themes, and ideas efficiently. More importantly, it's how those ideas can be subverted. A good example is the la 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 in Hadestown. It represents spring, hope, persistence, love. Orpheus uses this melody to do the impossible, to move stone walls, break through to cold-hearted Hades, and take Eurydice home. And during Doubt Comes In, it gets twisted into, well, doubt. The impossible doesn't seem possible anymore. His melody can't help him. Spring can't come quite yet. Even Sir Andy did a good job of this in Phantom, when Prima Donna has a brief reprise. In the first song, it's used to convince Carlotta to sing in spite of the Phantom's threats by asking her to think of her fans. Later, it's used to convince Christine to sing in spite of her conflicting feelings for the Phantom for the sake of everyone in the opera house. So let's talk about Love Never Dies. The Beauty Underneath's melody was introduced as a connection between Gustave and the Phantom, a spiritual connection that can't be explained in words. Or, as Greg put it,
Don't you feel the darkness, bro?
it's also used to describe, well, beautiful things or people. But it's also used when the Phantom and Christine are trying to figure out where Gustave went in the finale.
That perfidious Raoul! I will kill that drunken fool! That he dare take this child, a child that isn't his!
And when the Phantom is trying to negotiate a hostage situation.
Beauty sometimes goes unseen. We can't all be like Christine.
And when Gustave accepts the Phantom as his father, well, that one makes sense. This motif is at its strongest when it's used to display the connection between the Phantom and Gustave, and adding it with other contexts muddles that concept. Beneath a Moonless Sky is first used to describe the encounter that Christine and the Phantom had, but it also plays when the Phantom first makes his grand entrance. And as Madame Jury's anguished about losing her presumed inheritance. And when Raoul is drinking at the bar, but this time, it's a sultry saxophone.
The bill, okay?
But these are all such different situations, it gets weakened like the Beauty Underneath. And perhaps the most offensive attempt at using a motif, Till I Hear You Sing. Throughout the show, it's used to describe the music that Christine and the Phantom make together, and the build up to the moment Christine finally sings for him after so long.
Tonight for me, embrace your destiny. Let me hear you sing once more.
Fine enough. But then, in the finale, Christine sings to the Phantom, What? What a completely missed opportunity to use the titular song. Isn't love supposed to endure when you're gone? Life may be fleeting, love lives on. Why use Till I Hear You Sing to present your thesis when there's a Phantom song that he's written specifically for Christine about undying love called Love Never Dies? Ah! I know the Phantom sings it to Gustav after Christine dies, but why wouldn't he sing it to Christine when he wrote it for her? When she is dying and needs comfort from him in her last moments. Okay, yes, the Phantom is also experiencing something very traumatic, but surely he could give her something to ease a transition besides just smooching her, assure her that his love for her will never die because that's the whole reason any of this happened in the first place. Ah! There's a very clever inversion that I appreciated about Raoul's complaining melody, going from
What a dreadful town, what a vulgar place.
to a softer
Since our wedding day, things have gone astray.
when he's trying to convince Christine to leave with him. It's not thematically connected, but it's character connected, which I can respect. And then the OG Phantom motifs. They don't work unless you know the original show, because the Phantom of the Opera's melodies only make sense in the context of the show. Adding it into Love Never Dies as a little Easter egg doesn't communicate the story because it lacks the introduction of the motifs. Angel of Music doesn't make sense unless you know that it's used to lure Christine and trick her into believing that the Phantom is an angel sent by her late father. Twisted Every Way doesn't work because Christine originally sings it to debate risking her life and betraying her mentor in order to save everyone's lives. And now she's singing it to be like, ooh, which man do I choose?
Twisted every way, what answer can I give? I know I can't refuse, and yet I wish I could. Oh God.
Like I mentioned before, the most recent version of Love Never Dies includes Gustav playing and later singing Christine's melody when she's singing for the Phantom. You know the one. Not only does it make Phantom fans wince, it means absolutely nothing in the sequel. Nothing! Where the heck did he learn that? Is it just a song in his head? Isn't it just a vocal warm-up taken to the extreme because the Phantom was, you know, Christine's singing tutor? They also bring back the additional melody from Beauty Underneath, which kind of breaks up the flow of the song. And I know I'm being contradictory here. On one hand, having the same verse and chorus is a bit monotonous, but throwing in this extra verse seems to make the song less cohesive. So, the music, good, but also not good. So now, we finally reach the end of our journey. I filmed the introduction of this video in May 2023, and now it is almost 2025. My year has been pretty rough, and I really struggled with having the sufficient amount of energy to film and edit and slowly lose my mind. And all this started because I'm extremely sensitive to critical comments, despite my knowledge that they mean nothing in the grand scheme. I'm incredibly passionate about Phantom of the Opera, if that wasn't clear enough. Despite it not being the best musical in the world, it is still my favorite. It was the first Broadway show I saw when I was 14 on a marching band field trip. I let the spectacle astound me. My friends and I constantly sang the songs in the weeks after our trip. My dream role is to play Christine, even if I can never hit that E6. I have seen the show, whether touring or Broadway, 4 times. I bought a copy of the 25th anniversary production. I bought the album on iTunes. iTunes! Remember that time? That's why I feel so strongly about Love Never Dies. If this had been an adequate sequel, perhaps everyone in the fandom, including me, would have loved this show just as much. Instead, it's a complete letdown that is laughable. Yes, I'm still Team Raoul for life, and I'm displeased that Christine chose The Phantom. But besides that, Love Never Dies fails as a musical and a sequel. There are aspects of it that shine here and there, but a few good things do not make a good musical. With a weak story, inconsistent music, and a complete lack of faithfulness to the original story, there's no way I can praise the show. Even though I wish I could, there's so much potential. There's a ton of questions that can be posed in a story like this. Does Christine still feel obligated to the Phantom because he offered them mercy in exchange for her kindness? Could Raoul be wary because he knows of the Phantom's pull on her? Has Meg Giry felt jealousy for never being included in all the action? How does the Phantom cope with letting go of the one person who showed him compassion? These are excellent questions to ask, but only one is fully answered. It's that the Phantom does not cope well. But here's the crazy thing. The more I dived into every single rabbit hole I could, the more I started to actually kind of like it and appreciate some things. Look, plot, still bonkers. A good sequel? Absolutely not. But the music? I can vibe with it. Doesn't mean I would voluntarily listen to it or rewatch it. But if it happens to plague my life again, I can tolerate it. But I guess this is all to simply say, maybe it's okay to let love die. That's it.